Wednesday, October 30th, 2013.
It's extremely torrential rainfall that has trained across the area and may have brought as much as 15 inches of rain.
KXAN forecasts what would become one of the most powerful flooding events in Central Texas history.
No, it's flooded all the way around.
By nightfall, Austin Fire's 911 center began fielding the first of more than 660 emergency calls over the next day.
It might be a long time before anybody gets there.
Around 10 p.m., crews begin swift water rescues.
We walked out, but barely. It was up to my chest. The dogs swam.
Whatever you have to do
with our dogs.
Leave them. Multiple people might die on that street if you don't get out of that property.
Just the start of a long, hectic night into the morning of October 31st.
We're going to get there as quick as we can. Stay as high as you can.
We're standing in the back of a pickup truck, and we're going to die if somebody doesn't come and get us.
By 3 a.m., believing the rain had eased, managers cut back the number of 911 operators. But the water kept rising.
And 911 calls hit their peak soon after that as staffing at the call center was still scaled down. Extra dispatchers eventually arrived hours later at 7 in the morning.
And we spoke to people who say they called 911 and had to wait getting a recorded message.
KXAN investigator Robert Maxwell joins us live from Onion Creek, the area hardest hit. Robert, a lot of people wondering now if the city's call center is actually prepared for an emergency like this.
And that's what we wanted to find out. Remember the toll here. 5 people lost their lives in Austin, Travis County. And while some streets in this area have shown signs of recovery, others like this one are pretty much dead, except for the wind through the trees here. Take a look at this home here, long since abandoned. You may wonder, like we were, did a 911 call come from this house? Well, we listened to scores of 911 calls routed through the Austin Fire Department, handling the majority of water rescues. In the recordings you're about to hear, the operators answering those calls admit they were overwhelmed.
So are you outside now and you're walking?
No, we're inside the house still.
Austin 911, do you need police, fire, or EMS?
Hundreds of calls poured into 911.
We're trying to get a boat down there. If you can walk to safety, I recommend you do that.
Okay.
Quickly overtaking the Austin Fire Department call takers who were on duty at the peak of the flooding.
We're just overwhelmed right now. We're trying to get to everybody, okay?
Adding to their stress, the panic in some callers' voices.
Ma'am, how high is the water in your house?
Oh my God! Oh my God! It's to my front door!
Ma'am? Hello, ma'am?
It's still rising.
Can you swim?
Yes, I can swim. It's to my door. I want to drive. No, I don't want.
Ma'am, you're not going to die.
Fire department records show between 11 p.m. October 30th through noon the next day, call takers fielded 533 calls from trapped or frightened homeowners. An average October Wednesday overnight, the fire department might get a tenth that.
The fence was already down.
One of those callers was Sophia Loera.
It didn't feel like the water was stopping. It felt like it just kept going up.
She considered herself one of the lucky ones to get through to 911, but it would take several tries dialing.
And how many people are in your house? So I can tell them. 2 people, 2 dogs.
Loera is an Austin police officer, but that morning was just another homeowner desperate for a way out with no idea how high the water would get.
I didn't know when we were going to be helped.
The call taker could only tell Loera, like so many others, to get to higher ground.
So at that point, we decided to go ahead and try to tread through the water.
Many who remained trapped by the water had to wait for help from 911. Call takers transferred at least 250 callers to a recording.
You have reached the Austin Fire Department.
Some listened to that message over and over without getting immediate help.
Please hold for the next available call taker.
For a long minute or two.
Do not hang up.
One caller waited as long as 10 minutes.
Ma'am, I need to get you to the fire department.
Yes?
Stay on the line, please.
To the fire department.
You have reached the Austin Fire Department.
Boy,
do not hang up.
If you really need his help, he'd be dead by now.
John Sabatz, getting no help from Austin, even reached out to other agencies for assistance.
We're on the phone with my stepmother who lives in Georgetown, who was talking to the Williamson County 911 because we couldn't get through to the Austin 911. So we were doing a backdoor relay, and they were telling her to tell us to get out of the top of the roof.
So why were callers getting a recording? AFD records show about 3 a.m. call center managers scaled back extra staff, believing the heaviest rain had ended. By 5:30 a.m. on the 31st, with wide-scale flooding underway, AFD sent out a page for more call takers. It would double staffing to at least 6 by 7 a.m., but that would be a full hour after the call volume had peaked.
Should the need ever arise, AFD's call center has 12 call taker stations. So the morning of the floods, with 6 call takers and 3 dispatchers working, there were a few empty seats. All the while, flooded homeowners had to wait on hold, hoping the floodwaters wouldn't get any higher.
Somebody has got to answer the phone. If you're going into a queue, listening to a recording saying don't hang up, you're not going to be a happy citizen.
Mike Levy with the city's Public Safety Commission says 911 response times are a growing concern in Austin, and not just during a major disaster.
The city has other priorities. Public safety, the human condition, human life is not on that list.
And for 911 callers, whose safety was the priority the morning Onion Creek flooded.
It's already, to our back porch to the top. Like, you can't see the tires on our car or anything.
Waiting on hold and then being told they'd have to wait for rescue.
There's no path around your house that you can walk to a higher ground.
No, it's flooded all the way around.
Was the last thing many wanted to hear.
Okay. Be aware, we have rescues going around all over the city. It's going to be it might be a long time before anybody gets there.
Okay.
Now, we asked 911 call taker Commander Julie O'Brien whether call takers at the 911 call center are taught to stay on the line with callers in crisis situations. She told us, in general circumstances, under a normal day, the short answer is yes.
Well, what about the really busy times like the flood we had last year? What happens to that massive amount of callers being transferred sometimes to, like we saw, a recording?
Right. We saw some of this and heard some of this when we listened to the 911 recordings we got. What's supposed to happen is that callers are supposed to be transferred as soon as possible, of course, to the AFD. But what's happened to the call taker station? The call taker has given safety information to the caller. Get to higher ground was something we heard quite a bit. And then she's also at the same time typing in a message right to AFD, so they'll have an address to go to. It's called computer-aided dispatch. That is what's supposed to happen, Robert and Shannon. But certainly we'll find out when the city's own report comes out in a few weeks whether that protocol was followed. We're live in Onion Creek. Robert Maxwell, KXAN, investigates.
Really important story, Robert. Thanks. Well, when we asked Austin emergency officials about their standard protocol for staying on the line, they declined talking about it, citing security reasons. The city manager's office has also told several others we contacted not to give any interviews until the city's after action report comes out. That's later next month.
Didn't feel like the water was stopping. It felt like it just kept going up.
We are underwater.
Ma'am, you need to calm down.
Exactly 3 months after the deadly Austin floods, we're waiting to hear how our highly trained first responders performed.
A citywide report is due out in just a few weeks, but we discovered cracks already apparent in the system.
A 911 call center under stress, from a sky-high turnover rate to competition for call-taking staff from outside agencies. KXAN investigator Robert Maxwell is here with more.
The water is already up into the yard, and it may be too late to get out. And you guys were supposed to warn us or come evacuate us before it was so bad that we couldn't get out.
Ma'am, we've got several people in the area.
That rainy morning was traumatic for callers.
Austin 911, do you need police, fire, or EMS?
And high stress for 911 center call takers like these. They're trained to answer your call for help in less than 10 seconds, 90% of the time. For the vast majority of calls, they do it. Records show answers to calls within the goal of 10 seconds averaged 97% throughout 2012. By August, though, it had dipped below the national standard of 90%. Nearly 1,700 callers, or 2% that month, waited on hold between 1 and 2 minutes.
All right, that's fine.
And there are several factors at play. Today, city records show Austin's 911 center is battling a turnover rate of 30%, in line with rates seen in much larger cities. City records confirm as many as 16 vacancies right now. Austin Public Safety Commissioner Mike Levy says that's a recipe for inexperienced replacements.
So what you have is fewer and fewer experienced call takers who know how to properly manage a call. a complex call.
As far back as 2011, Austin Police Department, which oversees 911, completed this internal audit. It found scheduling and staffing can be difficult in the best of times. And it noted authorized staffing has not been adjusted for 10 years. And today, competition is fiercer than ever for part-time call takers. In December, longtime call center manager Marsha Brooks told the city's Public Safety Commission,
I lose people left and right, especially of late, because we simply don't offer benefits. And then the legal mandates have been increased.
Those legal mandates Brooks is referring to are new state licensing rules for telecommunicators. Brooks suggests the extra screening and testing is hardly worth it for those part-timers who can get an equal-paying call-taking job at a corporate call center. Sources tell KXAN APD's been so concerned it's now put a new police commander in place to coordinate both 911 recruiting and keeping staff, and to put in place recommendations from that 3-year-old audit. Those include psychological testing along with random drug and alcohol screening due to the stressful nature of the job.
We are underwater.
Ma'am, you need to calm down.
City records forecast 1 in 4 call takers will be on leave or ill this year. Commissioner Mike Levy says when 911 staff are out, others work overtime shifts.
The call takers that are there will have greater pressure on them. And the burnout factor is terrible.
The October 31st flood knocked the monthly call wait time numbers to their lowest average in 2 years. 86% of callers waited less than 10 seconds, but 3.7% over the month, or 1,800 callers, were left on hold for a full minute or more. KXAN asked how many extra 911 call takers could be brought in during a disaster. Assistant Police Chief Brian Manley chose not to say and followed a City Hall order to not speak specifically about the October 31st flood until city staff write up their own after-action report.
A natural disaster, weather-related like we've seen here, you're always going to have an incident that can occur that will exceed the capacity of the call center.
People weren't put on hold, or were they?
Again, that'll be part of the after-action report that we're going to issue on the Onion Creek flood.
When you have this kind of shortage in the 911 center, and nobody stands up and says, hey, this is a problem, you know, what does that tell you about the priorities of the city of Austin?
What's it going to take?
I don't know what it's going to take. It'll probably take a new council, you know, that 10-1 council. The people in the neighborhoods care about public safety.
And that 2011 audit we referred to in the story also brings up the size of the existing call center. It's big, and a backup call center exists as part of the city's overall emergency plan. But the main site was only built to handle 2010 call volume of about 800,000 annually. Given our fast population growth, the annual number of 911 calls in Austin might hit the 1 million mark later this year. But police say there's no need to expand the call center just yet. However, they won't speculate into 2015. I'm Robert Maxwell, KXAN Investigates. Austin's emergency response to a major disaster.
Ma'am, we've got several people in the area. We've got over 100 people trapped in that neighborhood.
An ongoing KXAN investigation reveals where 911 funding fell for police before the city's deadly flood. And whether it was during that tragic night or any normal day, the 911 call center has been under some strain and starving for more money to hire some new frontline staff. Your safety in emergencies mixed up in a political fight between city leaders for 2 years.
Austin 911, do you need police, fire, or EMS?
Showing us the sprawling 911 center she oversees, Austin Police Commander Julie O'Brien is concerned a dozen positions remain unfilled. What's the biggest challenge week to week when you come down here that you see?
Well, staffing is with making sure that you have the people that you need to cover the hours where you expect to see call load increase.
Those call load increases, call center managers say they're commonplace. Whether it's the daily rush hour on icy roadways, a brush fire where multiple people call 911, or October's Onion Creek flood. That morning, during the most critical 3 hours, more than half of the 1,100-plus emergency calls were put on hold, longer than the 10-second goal. More than 130 callers listened to a recording for more than a minute.
Please hold for the next available call taker. Do not hang up.
Even without October's record-breaking rainstorm. Records show Austin's 911 response problem is getting serious. During the summer of 2012, nearly 5,700 calls were put on hold. Last year, it shot up to more than 20,000.
You had last year 20,000 callers on hold for a period of time.
Who's responsible for that?
Well, that's certainly not a good thing to have 20,000 callers on hold, but I will draw attention to the fact that there are hundreds of thousands of other phone calls where it was answered in under 10 seconds. We're not satisfied with those kinds of numbers, and it's something you always try and work with.
KXAN found who was responsible, obtaining this internal email revealing a cost-cutting plan, a staffing initiative last year aimed at lowering the 911 answer rate or service level in order to be more fiscally responsible. That means fewer people answering calls and extended 911 hold times. Commander O'Brien says she can only advocate her staff's needs to her bosses at Austin Police.
We did have requests from communications for call takers and for dispatchers. The prioritization did not include placing the communications personnel at the top of the list.
As far as priorities go, the approved city budget cut $70,000 from emergency communications.
So why is Austin 911, a frontline life-saving division, not getting the money it needs to keep up with the growing city? The answer, it appears, resides here at Austin City Hall.
The only city council member to speak about it says last year she doesn't recall any real budget talk on 911.
Certainly, that would be something that our police chief and our assistant city managers and our city manager would have prioritized during the budget process.
Turns out they didn't, instead focusing on hiring new forensic technicians to reduce case backlogs.
Is it not time to put some more money back into 911, given that things are shifting so dramatically over there?
We are taking a very close look at our communications center this year, as we have in past years. We actually have added personnel in the management structure to our communications division here in the past couple of months. They're undergoing a evaluation of the staffing levels along with the operations from top to bottom.
And this really is timely. Assistant Chief Manley says that evaluation will be sent into APD chiefs in the next couple of weeks, Shannon, for this year's budget talks.
But Robert, it's not just the need for people and personnel like we saw in your story. There are equipment needs as well.
This is really the bottom line. You're not just talking about personnel. And so, as you can imagine, Chief Manley and other department heads say they can't rank where requests for things like 911 funding will be. They have to sift through all this, again, going into the fiscal year 2015 budget year.
Last night, a KXAN investigation revealed a plan to cut back on overtime at the city's 911 call center last year. It's a move that resulted in thousands more callers being put on hold.
And now, because of our report, an outspoken member of Austin's Public Safety Commission is angry at police. But he's putting the blame squarely on the shoulders of the city manager's office, which prepares the budget each year.
KXAN investigator Robert Maxwell is in the newsroom now with more.
Mike Levy tells KXAN he's never seen a plan to cut call taker overtime over at the 911 center, and he's fuming. This morning, he sent an email to Assistant Police Chief Brian Manley. He wanted to know why the information never appeared in public presentations Austin Police made to the Public Safety Commission.
After seeing your report, I'm most frustrated and sad and angry is we have known instinctively what's going on, but they keep saying, well, we can't provide that information.
KXAN first revealed an email sent from a 911 assistant manager to police saying the initiative was purposefully aimed at lowering our 911 answer rate to be more fiscally responsible. It came at the cost of extended 911 hold times. In the email exchange, a senior 911 manager said the initiative was aimed at reducing overtime, but that it wasn't an active aim to hurt the 911 service. Budgets at the call center have remained flat for 2 years.
If you go into a queue, a recording queue for 15 to 20 seconds to a minute to 5 minutes, you're not going to be a real happy camper.
In the summer of 2012, 911 dispatchers answered calls within a goal of 10 seconds 96.6% of the time. A year later, that number had dropped to 91.6%. Assistant Chief Brian Manley told KXAN the police department has shared information about those longer response times with the Public Safety Commission as recently as December.
This is a discussion at the Public Safety Commission annually. They get updates on the 911 call center. I believe the fact that you're doing this story, I do believe that it's getting attention publicly.
It has nothing to do with police administration. It's all about the city manager's office deciding unilaterally what priorities will be. Not council, not APD.
We put in a call to the city manager's office to get their reaction to Mike Levy's comments. Meantime, Assistant Chief Manley says he's expecting what he calls a top-to-bottom review of the city's 911 system heading into the spring budget process. You can check out our entire investigation and today's update at KXAN.com. In the newsroom, Robert Maxwell, KXAN Investigates.
Well, we took an in-depth look at some other needs in the city of Austin that did not make it into the budget. The total for this year was about 324 positions, estimated at nearly $35 million. What actually made it into the budget was just a small fraction of that. Remember, we first told you about a staffing shortage at the city's 911 call center, in part to save money.
Also, long wait times for 911 callers. Some people put on hold for as long as 10 minutes.
Now, for the first time, an early draft of the Austin Fire Department's After Action Report. It's a look at what went right and what went wrong during the flood.
KXAN investigator Robert Maxwell joining us live from Onion Creek in South Austin. And Robert, what does that report show?
You know, what's important to your safety and my safety is really the most important thing that came out of the report in our view. This report shows there's no formal process for Austin Fire Department to independently, on its own, activate the Emergency Operations Center. The EOC, as it's known, is that basically a room full of people that coordinates any major emergency response. Case in point, in the report, they show that the first signs of flooding up in central Austin happened at about 10 on October 30th. The next day, the EOC activated at 5:30, about the same time when the water was about up to here in Onion Creek, and people were running for their lives, fleeing for their lives, leaving their lives behind, and in sore need of many more rescue boats.
I want you to go find something that'll float.
The draft report points out a major flood hits Austin about every 10 years. Now, senior fire department staff are calling for the city to get more rescue boats and to have more staff trained to use them. The morning of the flood, 3 inflatable boats with motors were available and used in hundreds of rescues. We're hearing for the first time, though, there were 2 other boats available that went unused for hours. One had just returned from repair and was not inflated. A second was kept at AFD maintenance shops on 51st Street. As the flood began late on October 30th, AFD staff tried to ready these 2 watercraft. They were told to stand down after an assessment the weather was moving out of the area. It didn't. The report shows both of those boats eventually made it into the rescue fleet by 6:30 the next morning. That was at the height of the rescues over 5 neighborhoods. The report also calls for using outside water rescue boats and crews. Among 7 area agencies with boats, for example, is the Texas A&M Engineering Extension Service. Seen in this YouTube training video, it has 2 boats and helicopter rescue swimmers. The report reveals the day before the flood, that A&M boat team was put on alert, but the next morning, it was never put into action.
And this afternoon, about an hour or so ago, I reached out to AFD's Chief of Staff, Harry Evans, and he says, according to protocol, orders really from the city manager's office, he's not allowed to comment on this report until the final after-action report comes out, expected sometime as soon as next month. Robert Shannon.
So, Robert, just a quick question. We know it's been 5 months since this flood. What has AFD done since then?
The most visible thing you'll see is in January, AFD redeployed its fire rescue boats, the Swiftwater rescue boats, known as Zodiacs, you might be more familiar with, to separate stations around the city. They weren't a centralized location, so now they're near flood-prone areas. And the other thing they've been doing since October 2 is comprehensive training for flood rescue, including getting people out of vehicles that are stuck in floodwaters. For now, we're live in South Austin. Robert Maxwell, KXAN investigates.
It's not the first time Austin's police chief has apologized for the city's response to the Onion Creek floods in October.
4 people died, hundreds were left homeless, but only KXAN can tell you this is the first time in several years that Chief Art Acevedo is talking about taking a fresh look now at the failings of the 911 call center. Here's KXAN's investigator, Robert Maxwell.
We found out about the plans for a new communications division report as part of our ongoing KXAN investigation into the October 31st flood. Last week, the city released its flood report into what went right and what did not. But nowhere was there any mention of how an overwhelmed 911 call center that morning left more than 1,000 people on hold. KXAN first told you about the problem in February. Tonight, the chief of police says that information was left out of the flood report on purpose. You open the flood report, you open APD's attachment, there is no mention of the call hold times, there's no mention of what staff levels were that morning for people to study. Why not?
Because we're going to make that a separate piece, a separate component of our response and our report back.
The report could look like a police communications audit conducted in 2011. It found the call center had no new staff in more than a decade. In the ensuing years, tight budgets and other public safety priorities have meant pleas to add civilian staff have stayed out of the funding process. More on the money side. This June, the chief approved a plan to cut call taker overtime. That resulted in 911 callers being put on hold longer. He also admitted to KXAN the plan was supposed to end after 60 days, but mistakenly continued through last October. That included the Onion Creek flood. He denies the overtime cut initiative was politically motivated.
We have to stay within the confines of our budget.
So was this a political play to get some attention on the call center?
Oh, no.
To get some overtime dollars rolling this year?
You know what? Absolutely not. It's just we manage based on what's in front of us, based on threats. We identify threats. We identify needs every year.
Chief Acevedo says the new communications report from the police department will be out sometime this spring, and he promises it will pull no punches. As for that overtime cut plan to call takers, we hear that was phased out last fall, even though staffing levels were kept so that call center response guidelines were maintained. Back to you.
Now to the latest in our ongoing investigation into the health of Austin's 911 center. It's budget season, and Austin police now say adding new emergency call center staff is a top priority.
That decision is the core of an internal report KXAN revealed last week that predicts a staffing crisis within 2 years. But investigator Robert Maxwell was at today's Public Safety Commission where the shocker came down. Those positions may not be coming this year as expected.
Commissioner's jaws dropped when Assistant Chief Manley confirmed the proposed 2015 police budget makes no mention of a single new 911 call taker or dispatcher.
So if I understand, what you're saying is we don't have these positions, they're not in our proposed budget, but we need them. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. Instead, 36 critical new jobs are listed as unmet needs, $2.9 million worth. The reason appears to be timing. The call for new 911 staff comes months after the city manager's deadline for APD's and other departments' so-called critical needs lists. This year's forecast has the city considering 59 new officers and dealing with the costs of rising health insurance and fleet fuel. And in a first, Assistant Chief Manley says overworked dispatchers are at the root of longer police response times.
I think a lot of those issues will be addressed in the comprehensive 911 call center analysis that's in its draft form right now.
Call center sources say some dispatchers regularly juggle dozens of police units at once. Last year, the police goal was to get to your emergency call within 7 minutes. The reality? 7 minutes, 30 seconds. And that's why a recent internal report from Police Communications has become the workbook on how to fix an emergency call center, where the last truly new positions were added 12 years ago, where the number of short-term sick leaves is rising, where refusing mandatory overtime can lead to discipline.
I think it's outrageous. I think it's unfair to the community. I just think it's just plain nuts.
In Austin, Robert Maxwell, KXAN investigates.
One solution the commissioners heard is to pare back the request for the 59 new officers and redirect some of that money to 911. All budget requests must get approval from the city manager and ultimately city council members later this summer. The new budget year begins in October.
Well, here's the final report, 71 pages long. It was months in the making and a bid to correct years of problems at Austin 911, from a reliance on overtime to staff burnout. Now, this matters to you because this is the template for how our first responders in our growing area can get you help in the fastest way possible. With last week's flooding still front of mind, this review of 911 operations backs more ongoing training for emergency preparedness, things like dealing with unexpected spikes in call load. And there's already noticeable improvement. We told you through the early morning of last Friday's floods, the 911 center in Austin responded to nearly twice as many calls as normal. All but 5% were answered within 10 seconds. That's well within national standards and well above call takers' performance during the Halloween floods, when callers were left on hold listening to recordings after being transferred.
You have reached the Austin Fire Department.
Last Friday, overnight, police tell us 16 call takers were on duty. Compare that to last Halloween, when there were 15, but of those, 4 were people working a double. Now, this report also calls for more call takers, dispatchers, and support staff, and it's very similar to a draft version we told you about earlier in the year. And after our investigations and the publicity surrounding the 911 staff shortage in Austin, City Council members just approved 21 new 911 center staff in the fall budget. This evaluation also calls for more staff in each of the next 2 years. And there's a commitment to better pay training staff. Much more for you online in our Investigate section of KXAN.com. Robert Maxwell, KXAN Investigates.